Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair and restore, and as you can see, this one is running. Usually I prefer getting non-working clocks as it's more of a challenge to repair, but what attracted me to this one is the fact that it's a sessions clock, of which I don't see too many of those, and I also like items that have a nautical theme to it, and this is a ship's wheel. And these clocks were manufactured somewhere, most of the sessions clocks, from 1903 to 1933, although they did make them into the 40s and 50s as well. I believe that this is an older one, and I'm basing that on the fact that it's an all-wood case, whereas the later ones, they tend to have a bit of plastic in them. And on the back, it comments that it's a self-starting electric clock, which was a big deal feature back in the 30s because the real early ones, such as the Hammonds, were not self-starting. So that was something new, to just plug a clock in and have it go without having to spin a start knob. And interesting to see that as I handled it, it stopped running, and now it's going again. So maybe there are some issues in here that I'll have to repair to keep it going. So let me take a closer look and we'll figure out how we want to take this thing apart. I also want to point out a couple of other issues it has that usually keeps me away from these clocks. One is the fact that the glass is broken, has a crack in it. But in contacting the seller, I was able to get a measurement of this size, and I was able to locate a replacement piece of glass that was pretty inexpensive. And as I mentioned, missing a handle. And it also appears to be the wood case has a veneer covering the front, and this veneer is flaking off. As I handle it, little pieces of it just come off in my hands, and I don't know if I want to maintain the old look of this or if I'm going to sand the veneer all the way down and just try to restain it and polish it that way, or just look to clean it up and maintain it sort of the way it looks now. Anyway, as I said before, I'm going to figure out the best way to take it apart. In turning it over, it has a couple of unusual screws holding the back on. You can see it sort of has just a slot. So let's take these two out and see where that gets us. Instead of a regular looking screw, seems to be almost like a sleeve. Here's one. And two. Now, not sure if the whole clock face is going to come out from the front here, but I imagine that's the way it'll go. Yep. Now, in looking at this particular mechanism, I'm thinking this is a more modern clock than the 30s. I could be mistaken, but I'll try to do some more research on it to see what I can come up with. In any event, the next step is going to be undoing these wire nuts so I can disconnect the power cord. And it's unplugged. There we go. Okay. So this is what I refer to as a flywheel as compared to the oil-filled rotors that are more common in the older clocks. But I'll still look to disassemble this, definitely clean up the gears and lubricate them, and hopefully figure out why it seems to occasionally stop. The set stem and knob seems to be functioning well. I'm able to change the time. So now that once I get the wire out of here, I'll reconnect the cord and try to figure out why it's not running consistently. Sometimes you can see a gear shifting that jams it up, but let's find out. A couple of other things to note here. One is, just in handling this case, pieces of the veneer are just flaking right off. I have a nice piece right here that came from the back. So I really don't know if I'm just going to look to strip all of it off or not, because it's sort of unfortunate that simple handling causes so much of it to pop off. That's one. Secondly, the fact that I'm seeing wire nuts attached here tells me that this clock likely was repaired at some point. This is definitely a more modern type wire, something from the 30s. I would expect to have a Bakelite plug, which this does not have. But I've reconnected it, and we'll turn it on and see how it runs. Now, earlier when I was just turning the clock around, it would stop running. And so far, no matter how I turn it, it's still going. What's definitely unusual here is how the gears are set up on the inside. I have not seen that before, and I'll try to show it to you. Usually all the gears are just on one level, with the stems, you know, meshing with each other. But here it seems there's vertical and horizontal gears. You can kind of see, it's actually kind of cool how that's working in there. But so far, it's running. So what I'm going to do next is remove the face and the hands, try to get the new glass inserted in it, and we'll see how it goes. The brass rim here is attached with these bent tabs all the way around, so I'm going to remove the power cord again, bend all of these out, and then look to separate it, and then I'll come back. I've bent back all of the tabs except the last two, which I'll do now. And one thing I can mention is I've noticed with clocks, as they get to be not quite as old, the clock companies, it seemed they would try to use less expensive parts and materials. For example, bending these tabs back, this is pretty thick metal. It took a lot of effort to bend them. Some of the newer ones, they're very thin, they bend very easily. So I keep going back and forth wondering just how old this clock might really be. It may be older than I think. But even if it's from the 50s, that would make it a good 70 years old. 30s, then you're pushing 90 years on it. So it's old. Anyway, let's bend these last couple back. There we go. Looks like I forgot this one. And let's see how easy we get this off. Okay, it's definitely hanging up somewhere, so I'm going to have to take a closer look to see what edge is getting in the way, and then we'll come back. What I've done is I bent the tabs even further back, and that seemed to free it up. I'm able to pop this out a little bit now at a time. I think it's coming. Here's that. And then we have the broken glass. So we'll look to polish up the rim. I'll remove the hands and clean up the dial. The dial is attached to this back plate. There's a tab over here and down here, so I just have to bend those out and the face will come off. So we'll get to work on the hands first. Just one trick I want to show you if you ever have to replace a piece of broken glass and you have the glass in pieces. The measurement is really critical, and what I did just now is I taped together the broken piece, and what you do is it's difficult to measure the diameter on a curve when you're putting a tape measure or whatever over it. So once you have it together, just go around the edge. Then you can measure the diameter this way. And when I did that, I came up with what looks like almost 4 inches, almost either 3 7/8 or 3 15/16. Now the piece of glass that I got for it is said to measure 4 inches, which means it might be just a little larger than this. However, when I place it back in the rim, there is a little bit of wiggle room here. So even if the glass I'm getting is just 1/8 of an inch larger than this, it should still fit. So let me go see if I'm correct on that. And I'll come back once we have the glass. I've ordered the glass, I'm just waiting for it to arrive. But in the meantime, I'll work on removing the hands and the face and cleaning up the gears, seeing how much I can disassemble this. So I'll get started on that next. The hands are usually on just with friction grip holding them. I should be able to pry them off. If I have a really hard time, I'll loosen it up with a bit of WD-40. But let's try without it first. There's one. I think we're okay, no damage. Let's try the next one. You just have to go nice and easy. Don't want to use too much force. Is the minute hand. Now I don't want to scratch the dial, so I like to slip a piece of cardboard under it. I've almost seen this, it should come off, but it seems to move with the whole stem that's holding the gear underneath. I think it's coming. There we got it. Next I'm going to bend the 2 tabs, or at least one of them, to slip off the face. Usually just prying one, it should just slip right off. And there we go. This will clean up later. And normally I should find a couple of screws holding all the mechanism to this plate, but it really looks as if, okay, it's unusual. It's sort of nuts, but they're not really nuts. It's just sort of wings, it seems, but I think I can try to undo these, which will get the whole mechanism off and give me access to the gears so I can clean and lubricate them a bit. That'll take me a little while though, so I'm going to do that and then we'll come back. I've removed 2 of the 3 nuts that are holding this, and before I take off the third one, I place just a little blue tape. This is where the 12 is, where the face sat, so there won't be any confusion putting it back on. And let's remove the third one now and see what we get. Let's take this off. Okay. At least I can get in here to clean up the gears. I see 3 nuts here, which holds this plate on. But what I'm going to do now, that I always recommend, is I'm going to take a few photos of each step of the way. So once everything is removed, I'll have a good record and we'll be able to put it back together in the right order. So let me do that, and then I will come back, possibly after having removed these 3 nuts and seeing how these gears come off of here. I've removed the 3 nuts holding the plate, and these top gears come off pretty easily. First this one, and this one. To lift this up, a lot of times some of the gears underneath will stick to the plate, and I'll try to hold them down with a little screwdriver, because if they pop out and I don't see the position, it might be hard to get it back in there. And it's difficult to show you how I do that. So I'm going to remove this on my own, and then I'll come back and let you see how it looks with the plate off. I removed the top plate. I took some photos so I know where everything goes. I zoomed in a bit now so I can try to show you. These were the 2 gears that were on top of the plate. Whoop. Plate comes off, and we have a long gear on this stem here, and then this one comes off, and that's pretty much it. This one here stays in place. I could probably pry it out, but there's no need to. I can easily clean around it the way it is. So I'm going to clean up all the gears, reposition everything, and reassemble this. So when I come back, this will be back intact again. And I'll be reattaching it to the plate. I've reassembled the mechanism. I cleaned and lubricated the gears with synthetic clock oil. I also reconnected the power cord just to make sure it's still working before placing it back into the plate. So let's see how we do with that. And it's running, so we're all good here. Also, I can mention that the coil, which is in here, since it's not an oil-filled rotor, I don't need to open this up to try to clean it out. I really don't think I need to try to lubricate this flywheel. It's moving quite freely. So next step will be getting this back onto the plate and putting these gears back on. The mechanism is back on the plate, and I'm going to put this aside for the moment. What I want to do next is I want to clean up the hands and the dial, and also want to polish up the brass rim. We'll get a new piece of glass, and then how to best clean up the case. Initially, because it looks so weathered, I wanted to maintain that appearance. I thought it was appropriate for a ship's wheel, but because every time I handle it, pieces of the veneer flake off, I just can't do that. So I will probably sand off the veneer, and then because this appears to have been black along with the base, and we have the brown wood here and here, I'll look to repaint it. And I can remove these little handles, polish them up as well, and we'll see how it comes out. So it'll take me a while to work on that. Once that's done, I will come back. One interesting thing to note is that, and I've cleaned up the dial and the hands, that came out rather nice. In looking at the case, I started to remove all the little handles from it, and I can't get this one out. There's no room to slide it out, which tells me that this base is probably screwed in to the top part of the case. Now on the bottom, I have this felt pad, and I'm going to try to remove it, and I'm assuming there might be a couple of screws right here, so I can remove this and then get this piece out. Also of note is I actually have a name, address, and phone number of a previous owner of this clock here, although I have to think that person is likely long gone. In any event, I'll get this off, try to take this apart, and see how that works. I was able to remove the felt pad, and as I suspected, found a couple of screws here. So I'll take those out, which will free up these two pieces, and that's also going to make it a lot easier to restore the wood as far as access to sanding and staining and painting and whatnot. So I'll get back to work on all of that. I'll show what I've done so far. I removed the base from the rest of the case and placed some painter's tape around the edge here. And I plan to paint all black around the edges. The wood here I'll maintain with some stain and a wax polish. And the rest of the case I was able to strip off and sand away the veneer that was on here and discovered the spring separates, which is going to make it a lot easier for me because I'll end up painting all of this black along with the base. And the rest of the case I'm just going to stain it and polish it with some wax. And when I come back, hopefully all of that will be completed. I painted the rim and the base black around the edges. I also stained the wood as well as waxed it, both the bottom of the case and the case itself. I also polished up the brass rim as well as the little handles that go around the wheel. And I used a new product for this. Usually I use Noxon. This time I picked up something called Brasso. And I don't know if this is a stronger polishing material or if the Noxon that I have is just quite old, but it seemed to do a much better job than I'm used to seeing. You can really see the difference, the before and after. It brought up a real nice shine. Anyway, the next step will be to start to reassemble everything. I reseated the face. I've reattached the hands. I screwed the base to the rest of the frame, and I inserted the handles onto the wheel. One thing I did differently is because unfortunately this was missing one of these handles. It was here, if you recall. I couldn't get it out until I got the base bottom removed. Rather than just have one here, which would have offset the missing one, I decided to just go without it. So that'll sort of be how it's going to end up looking, which is not bad. The next step for me will be to seat the glass into the rim, and then I attach the rim to the face by bending these little tabs back, and then the whole thing will get reseated into the case and secured with the screws. So I'll get to work on that next. I've positioned the glass in the rim, reseated it to the plate, bent the tabs all around back in to secure it. And one interesting note about the glass is when I ordered the clock and saw that the glass was broken, I had the seller measure the diameter, both the inside and outside diameter of this rim, and I came up with 4 inches. And that was the glass that I ordered. I found some inexpensive replacements on eBay, but when it arrived, it turned out to be 4 1/8 inch, and it didn't fit. And I have discovered a site that sells clock parts at a relatively good prices. It's called timesavers.com, and I was able to get when I measured it myself, it actually came out to be 3 7/8 of an inch, and they had that precise size. So that's what's in here. The next step will be to reattach the power cord. I've attached the power cord, and you'll note I put a knot in the wire so you can't pull it out of the back of the clock. And now I will reseat the whole thing. Okay, there we go. Now I just have to secure the screws back into the back of the case and it'll be finished. Let me put those in and we'll come back. Everything's back together. I'll plug it in. And it's working. So there you have it. The Sessions nautical themed ship's wheel clock. Oh my goodness, what is going on? If you noticed, as I just did, that the second hand isn't moving properly. It's slowing down, speeding up, stopping momentarily, which is pretty much exactly what it was doing at the start of the video, if you recall. So clearly there's something else going on inside that's affecting how the clock is running. I'm gonna have to open it up again and try to troubleshoot it once more. And once I do that and get some more insight on it, I will come back. I've taken the whole thing apart again. And what I discovered when I was looking at it run was that this gear here, when it would rotate, there was a smaller gear here that was not properly meshing with the vertical one. And it would go for a while and then it would slow down. The teeth would not mesh properly and it would sort of slow down and speed up. And when I attempted to adjust the gear to try to nudge it just a little bit, I broke it. So as soon as that happened, I realized that the only way I'm going to be able to restore this clock is if I can somehow come up with another one just like it and take the parts from one to the other. So I'm going to look into seeing if that's a possibility, and that way I can continue with this particular restoration. The good news is I was able to find another clock just like it. It's taken me a couple of weeks to get it. It has some good and bad things about it. What is bad is the fact that the case is broken, what is cracked. You can see how wobbly the bottom is. It does not run, and obviously I don't know why yet, haven't opened it up. It does have all the handles on the wheel, so I'll be able to take the missing one for the first clock that I'm working on. It also has a nice piece of glass, so now I'll have an extra piece of glass. And best of all, I got this for pretty much next to nothing, so I'm quite happy having to get it, and hopefully I'll be able to take the part that I need to fix the first clock. I do want to open it up and see if I can figure out why this one is not running as well. So we'll do that first. As with the first clock, I've taken out the two screws in the back here, and the whole mechanism should just come right out of the case. And one thing I can tell right off the bat is the first clock I've been working on, that has had its power cord replaced because it had the wire nuts attaching it to the motor, if you recall. Here you can see what looks like the original cord. And let's plug it in and see what happens. Okay, let me flip on the power. Moving quite slowly. So clearly there's an issue with the motor, but I really don't need the motor, I just need the one part. Now suddenly it's spinning. I don't know if you can see it, I'll try to get a close up, but anyway, the gear is in there. I just have to take this whole thing apart and retrieve it, and once I have it, I'll show you which part it is. Let's turn this off for the moment. It's also a very noisy motor. So I'm just going to go ahead and totally disassemble this motor, and once I have the part that I need from it, I'll show it to you, and then I'll put it into the other motor. So that'll take a bit of time. I'll work on that, and then we'll come back. I've taken the new one apart, and I'm going to show you what broke on the first one. This gear over here, you can see this little sideways skinny gear, and on our original one it broke off. So what I have to do now is remove this piece, but I'm seeing that because of the way this gear meshes with this vertical one, I'm going to have to take off the nuts here to get the plate off, because this spindle, which is what controls the second hand, is in the way of removing this. So let me work on that. I removed the nuts. Let's see what happens when I lift up the plate. Okay, that's good. Now let's see how easy it is to remove this gear from this little housing. And we got it. But that means I'm going to have to undo the same couple of nuts on this motor in order to place this gear back up against that upright spindle. So something else for me to work on, and then I'll come back. A couple of differences I'm noticing between these clocks is that the second one has brass colored plates, whereas the first one, they're silver, which I really didn't think mattered much. But one difference that does matter is this plate was held onto the clock with a couple of nuts that fit over these threaded screws here, whereas this one seems to have little metal tabs that lock this on, and I'm hoping I can rotate this into this opening here to pop this plate off. If I can't budge it, then I'm going to have a real problem fixing this. So let me work on that, and then we'll come back. And I'm also thinking and looking at it that this is a newer version of this clock. I think this one is older. I think it probably is a cheaper way to make it with these little metal buttons than using threads and nuts on this one. Anyway, let me see if I can get this off, and then I'll come back. Try as I might, I am unable to pop this plate off of here. I just can't budge it. And looking at it sideways, it looks like there is a spring clip between the motor and this plate, but even pressing it down doesn't seem to release it. I'm reluctant to force it and break something, but what I did do was hook the power cord back up to this one, and I have the other one powered up, and turning them on, they're both spinning, and I'm not certain if they're both spinning the same speed, if the newer clock here is running just a little bit slower, this one. But I think my only other option at this point is to go with the second motor, clean up the gears on that, on this one, and substitute this motor for that one in the original clock. So I will have to clean up all the gears the way I did on the first one. And once that's all cleaned and put back together, I'll come back. I figured out how to remove the flywheel, the whole coil system here from the plate. Once I removed the old gears from the second motor, have it cleaning in an ultrasonic cleaner, I looked again at the fact that I realized there's sort of a spring underneath this plate, and when I would press down on it, it would flex. And although I couldn't flex it enough holding it this way, I tried and realized that if I put it down in this fashion and just press firmly down, it caused the plate to kind of expand out, and then I was just able to lift this right off of it. So now I can go back to plan A, which is put the new gear, the second gear, on the original motor. So let me reassemble the whole thing, and then I'll come back. And just a quick tip, you may have noticed a little blue tape on the edge here. I put a piece on the coil and a piece on the plate so that once it's removed, there's no confusion when I place it back on which way it's supposed to go. The tape's going to line up. Anyway, as I'm saying, let me put everything back together. All the gears and the plates are back together. Everything is secured. And I'm going to place this back into the plate, put everything together, and when I come back, I should have a completed clock ready to be plugged in and tested out again. Everything is back together. I'm going to plug it in, and we'll turn it on. and it is running, and the second hand is running smoothly. So we have a relatively successful repair and restoration of what is a Sessions ship's wheel clock. I believe it was made sometime in the 1940s or 50s. And it was challenging to do this one. It was interesting getting a similar clock, which should have been identical, but it had so many differences. In any event, if you've enjoyed the video and haven't seen any of my others, please feel free to check them out. I hope to be back soon with some new ones. And that's pretty much it. Bye for now.